So the first real slump of the season for the Warriors, losing 4 games in a row. It's not just that they lost 4 games. Contextually, it's how it's felt and how it's looked that's concerning. I think we all understand 82 games, there's going to be ups and downs, but you've got Steph looking tired and old, the defense that started the year nowhere to be found, and our young players kind of just running in place, just sputtering. Right. And then there's this rotation and all the Kerr talk here. And so I thought it'd be a good time to do a little mailbag here. And I will do a live stream, I think, later in the week where more people can chime in. So, we'll see how long this goes here. But let's start with Keith. I think that it's time to let go of the past and admit Steve Kerr isn't a great coach in today's NBA. Too reluctant on his movement offense and doesn't change styles dependent on matchup. Tiny lineups will have lineups of 3-4 guys not willing to score, still on a 12 to 13 man rotation. And that's the hot button topic, right? Steve Kerr. Look, Steve has always been his power as a coach has been his emotional IQ and his management of egos and star players. Right? Like Steve would be great for the Suns right now or Dallas, but the Warriors, the reality is we only have got 1 star player. Oh yeah, and he's our solar system. He's our system. And so, I think there's a bit of a misconception where people are like, oh, Steve is forcing this motion offense and forcing all this. Steph has as much say as Steve does. Please believe that with the offense. It's not like Steve is calling every play down the court like it's a high school game. I think that we have to understand that Steph wants to play this way, and I think Steve being stubborn, they're both kind of just grasping, holding on to this system. And so I'm not blaming Steph, but I think that ultimately what it's going to take is for Steph to go to Steve and say, hey, I want to play different. I think we got to play different, And until that happens, I think that we're going to still see this. And again, it's not football. They're not calling every play. There's sets, there's second sets, and the flow is what they want, right? I understand that. But then you talk about the players and the personnel here's the thing with the system, right? You're not, generally speaking, you're not going to find bigger players who perform well in it, right? Like pass, dribble, make quick decisions. Generally, 6'10" NBA players don't do that very well, right? So now when you're looking for system fits, they're usually smaller players, right? And then the other aspect of bucket getters, guys that can ISO, go get their own, innately, they're typically not going to be players who cut well, pass, and screen, because how did they become go-get bucket guys? That's what they do. And so now you're stuck with these personnels, these rotations of smaller guys who can't get their own. But ultimately, this 12, 13-man rotation, I said it in yesterday's Patreon, to me, it's arrogant and lazy at the same time from Steve. It's arrogant that he thinks that he could pull it off, right? And then it's lazy in the sense of it's easy to keep everyone happy when everyone's playing. Maybe not the amount of minutes that they want, but it's easy to keep the chemistry up. If it's like, oh, everybody's going to get an opportunity. This is a democracy, right? Like that's easier. That's lazier than if you have to put your foot down and be like, nah, man, you ain't cutting it. Moses, you ain't cutting it. Lindy, you ain't cutting it, right? And so, yeah, man, I see a lot of parallels between the Niners and Warriors right now. And even with Steve and Kyle, and kind of like, hey, are they not willing to adapt because of their prior success, right? Both teams need to get more athletic, it feels like, But I don't even want to talk about the Niners right now, right? That's a sore subject in the Bay Area. Wiggs burner. Why is the defense hell-bent on overhelping every single time? Last 4 losses, all attributed to that, except OKC maybe. Very frustrating. Yeah, man, that's my biggest issue right now is the defense and slipping back into these old habits. And again, getting to the root of it, it's the size, right? I think philosophically, they're like, everyone has to help because we have to make up for our lack of size and rim protection. And as we know in the modern NBA, never mind the offense. Like we talk about Kerr adapting and modernizing, we need to modernize our defense. And so it's like this all hands on deck thing. And you see this at all levels, like especially like in high school level, when you're a smaller team, coach tells everyone, hey, we all got to get to the glass. We all got to get to the glass. And it has all these unintended consequences. And that's what we're seeing with it. Besides the crazy closeouts that it creates, right? Where we can't, all of a sudden we're just getting picked apart. You saw it in Phoenix. It also encourages too much ball watching. If you're Moses Moody or you're Podziemski and they've told you, no, you're going to help. You got to help. Everyone's got to help, right? So what are they doing? They're all watching the ball. They're all constantly watching the ball. And too often they're not tracking and sticking to theirs and they lose theirs, especially if you're on. Like I watched them lose Booker and KD on the weak side, like watching the ball because, like there has to be some IQ and there has to be a method to it. There's such a gray area defensively that players either get or don't get. And unfortunately, a lot of our young players just don't get it. Like you're splitting the difference on the weak side. You got Durant in one corner and you got what is Tyus Jones on the wing. Like you're not going to stand right in the middle. You're good. You're ready to pounce to KD, right? You have to be you have to anticipate some of these things. And a lot of the reason we had so much success with some of this stuff in the past is you had Livingston, you had Iguodala, you had these guys that could make up the difference, that understood the gray area. And so even if the philosophy was flawed, their length, their athleticism, and their IQ hid that. But yeah, man, I think until we get bigger, I think that this philosophy and these habits are going to stick, unfortunately. And that doesn't necessarily mean you need Rudy Gobert at the front of the rim, but just generally overall bigger, right? If you can, it doesn't have to be one giant big, but if we can just roll out bigger lineups, I think that can help a lot. And then the zoning up. You see Podziemski and Draymond, because we had some success with this in the 22 season. Remember when it was like the Warriors' innovative defense, Draymond is zoning up behind the ball, right? And then they're like playing this hybrid zone defense. But what has changed since then is on any given night, teams are taking 45, 50 threes. And so it's just not feasible to do that any longer. And then the ball screens with the young guys. And I went on a rant about this yesterday, so I'll share it with y'all because it's really frustrating. And I think this is out. This is on the scouting report against the Warriors. Hey, reject the screen and you're going to get whatever you want. And particularly with the young players, Podziemski and Kuminga, what I see is they're overzealous to get through the screen. They want to get through the screen so bad, they're loaded up and they're almost trying to get through it before it even occurs, right? And so you just start to look like you're using that screen and reject it and you're gone. It's free, right? Moses, I don't know what angles he's taken here. I don't know what to say about Moses Moody defensively. He's like hedging over to the screen. It looks almost like Moses tries to ice the screen. Y'all know what I'm talking about, right? Where you shade towards which way the screen's coming, so you deny the screen, and then your big is here. And it's like, hey, we're not going to let you run this pick and roll. It almost looks like Moses is icing screens that aren't being iced, and then he's just giving away straight line drives. But when his feet stop defensively, it's over for him. It's over for him. And not to go off on a rant on Moses Moody, I think we all like Moses Moody, the person. Moses Moody, the basketball player, just isn't very good, man. Right? He doesn't really pass. He's been a horrible defender, and he's not getting the volume that he needs to do what he can do, which is score, and that's the only thing he does. It's very frustrating. Before we move on to the next question, Underdog, you can get a 50% bonus on your first deposit up to $1,000 using the code Alchemy. I've got Lakers Wolves picks tonight. That's the game that I'm most interested in. The Lakers are so slow and unathletic on the perimeter. You know Ant's going to get up like 10, 12 three-pointers, right? So I like Ant higher than 3.5 threes. And then Dalton Knecht, he's a fun watch, right? 2.5 higher for him on the threes. They're becoming reliant on his offense, right? But I'm curious to see how that game plays out. Two of our Western Conference foes who have been disappointing as well, right? And if you talk about the West, we'll talk about the West here at the end. Let's jump into another question, but Underdog, support the channel. Use the code Alchemy. Here we go. Most realistic acquisition. Warriors need to keep 14 players on the roster and can't receive more money than sending out, so they stay under the first apron. Now, again, there's going to be some salary juggling, and, you may have to like convert somebody for this. But the name I brought up the other day, it's not a new name, but if we're talking about realistic acquisitions that would play an impact, I'm still interested in Kyle Kuzma. And look, he's having a down year. I wouldn't look at his numbers right now. Whenever I watch the Wizards, Kuzma looks like a guy that's dogging it to try to get out of town. He really is. Now, you may say, I don't want a player that would do that. Fair, right? Again, we're talking about realistic acquisitions. This isn't like a dream trade, but I think he's available, right? And, he already has a relationship with Draymond and Steph. I think he was a clutch guy. He has championship big game experience. And what he would do is it would force Kerr to have some bigger lineups. Again, I know he's not like a rim protector. He still goes 6'9", 6'10". And what he does is he guards up well. You don't necessarily want him switching out on guards, but he can switch on centers and bigger players. He's physical. He's a wide frame that can defend when he's really asked to. I think the buy-in, my point I think overall is Kyle Kuzma would look a lot different on a hungry Warriors team that actually is contending for something, as opposed to this young Wizards team that's just in a full rebuild with a bunch of young guys, right? And I think that his offense would be much more efficient in our movement. Is he a go-get-a-bucket guy? Not really. But again, in our movement system, he's a guy, what he does very well is second side attack. You hear Kerr talking about, well, we like Pajemski attacking closeouts and second side attacking. Kuzma is really good at that. Only he's 6'10" and he can finish at the rim, right? And so could you make a Melton, Moody, and first for Kuzma? Again, the numbers are Moody, I had just said previously, like he can't be traded. Someone had corrected me. He can be. The trade machine said he couldn't. But I did a little more research after someone pointed it out to me. He can be traded, but his outgoing salary counts as $12 million. So Melton and Moody would get you just about to that Kuzma contract. They'd have to send back, a minimum or something like that. But it's feasible. And again, I'm not saying it's a dream scenario. I'm not like, hey, we need to get Kyle Kuzma, but I think it's a realistic one that would realistically help us with our size issues, and a guy that can get you 20 on most nights, a third guy. Wiggins has been solid. Right now you have three guys that on most nights can give you 20 points. Hypothetically, if we drafted Franz Wagner instead of Kuminga, would he be flourishing like he is in Orlando? I think he would. It wouldn't look the same, right? He certainly probably wouldn't be this ISO scorer that he's developing into and having the ball as much. But I think that from day one, right, if we're talking about Kuminga and Franz as rookies, he was a better defender and he was much more fundamentally sound. So I think developmentally, Kerr, in my mind, would have played Franz more than he had Kuminga, because he doesn't have the same holes in his game that irritate Kerr, right? But yeah, I think he would still be flourishing. I think he still would have gotten a big extension, and he would kind of be still viewed in the same light. Maybe not quite right now. People with Ben Caro out, people are like, dude, is Franz like a number one, right? I don't know about that, right? I don't know if the numbers would be as gaudy, but I still think he would have got a big rookie extension. And, if you want to keep it real, he's just objectively a better basketball player than Kuminga. Like I have no problem saying that. Now, I think the more interesting question is, what would Kuminga look like now had he been in Orlando? Now there's a chance where Kuminga could just be a 25-point guy. I'm not ruling that out. I'm not trying to shit on Kuminga here. But if we're talking about basketball, dribble, pass, shoot, see the floor, like Franz is just a better basketball player, right? So he would have been a better system fit, but coulda, woulda, shoulda. Is it time to admit that Steph is too old to be the number one on a championship caliber team? Both Steph and LeBron look old right now. And we know they are old, right? But unusually old for, less than 20 games into the season. And I've brought this up before. Is this the cost of that Olympic run? Because you say, these guys are high. Like, it wasn't that, what was it, like 8 games, 6 games? No, but it disrupts their off-season process of, I'll relate it back to the fight game in MMA, right? It's peaking, it's one thing to get in shape. That anybody can get in shape with discipline, right? But why you have trainers and these guys that are super good at it is they get you to peak at the right time, right? And Steph, LeBron, these guys have mastered peaking within the, they take their little blocks of rest and then they peak at the right time to get through the season. And I think it may have disrupted that playing in those Olympics. I don't think they'd take it back. You get it. We got the golden dagger. You can't complain, but there's a cost to everything, right? There's a cost to everything. And look, when you look at let's look at Dame Lillard, Jimmy Butler, not that they have anywhere near the resume that Steph does, but I think during their primes were considered players who could be the best player on a championship team, right? A franchise player. At this point for them at their age, it's like, no, they can't be, right? They can't be. What separates Steph is what we talk about so much is the gravity. He's the solar system. Him being the gravity in the full system, technically, I think, yes, he still can be the best player on a championship team, the number one guy. But I think the shift needs to come from where he has to be more of a closer than a carrier, right? He has to be more of a closer. And LeBron's been doing it longer than Steph as far as pacing himself through a game and then trying to close it out. And in part because he's had AD and probably a more talented rosters the last couple of years. But Steph's I think he's got to pace himself early and then close. But technically he's still the system. Now, does that mean we need, and that's why we've seen, right? It's been 2-3 years of second star. We need a second star. That's in anticipation of this. Yes, Father Time, we know, the saying, right? But I don't necessarily think it has to be Paul George, Lauri Markkanen, a second star. It can be by committee, but we need more bucket getters, right? That's why I brought up Kuzma. I don't think it has to be a star, but if you get Kuzma and then there's some other side move where you get another guy that can kind of create, right? It can be by committee, but the committee has to be some more guys that can get their own, right? And carry through the first 3 quarters and then let the chef put the night-night on them. If you were the NBA commissioner for a day, what's the first change you would make? Give Steph the whistle. Nah, give Steph every whistle. He deserves it. Give him the whistle that all the other stars get. No. I think that I would adjust the block charge rule where if the offensive player turns the corner, is getting downhill, and does that shoulder charge move, they initiate the contact with the shoulder, it's a no call. AKA the Giannis rule, right? You've already gained the advantage by clearing out space with the shoulder. You're not getting the whistle too. And too many guys will turn the corner, come off a screen, just slam the shoulder into the defender, fall back and get the whistle too. You want it. You're initiating the contact. And I know that all this is subjective and not as easy to referee in real time. But I think that one for me, that Giannis rule of if you're coming down full steam, you barrel your shoulder. I don't care where their positioning is. You've created your advantage. You got that advantage. You're not getting the whistle too. That's, I think, the first thing that I would look at. I hate for this to be such a negative one, but we're on a 4-game skid here, and it doesn't, it is what it is right now. Hopefully we can be more positive on the live stream here towards the end of the week. My guy, I've already put him on one of these episodes, but he keeps delivering some hot takes here. Maybe not a hot take, but some good takes just for comments channel. I got to say it. Trayce Jackson-Davis plays soft. There's been too many times where he's gone up for a dunk or a lay and gets blocked by guys smaller than him. Unless it's an alley-oop from the dunker spot or a wide open dunk, he hasn't shown he can score inside. There's times he looks scared. I haven't seen him try to show his presence on the defensive end or offensive end. I can see why Loon started the second half versus the Suns. Go ahead and watch him a little more carefully for yourself. I hope he proves me wrong over time, but he's playing soft. Oh, I've been watching Trayce. And Looney has played better than Trayce this year. Now, defensively, I've been impressed with his timing. Obviously, he gets some block shots. He loves to come over from the weak side. But even when he comes to help or when he steps up at a screen action, I think his timing has been pretty good. I haven't been too down on him defensively, especially compared to our other young guys. Offensively, listen, there is this thing that has been around since the beginning of basketball. It's called a pump fake. It's called a pump fake. Now close your eyes and think about Trace. Have you ever seen Trace pump fake? Have you ever seen Trace Jackson pump fake? It's amazing, right? It's amazing. Now, I'm not so sure that it's soft as much as he's stiff, right? Like, pause, right? He's just stiff. He doesn't have great hip bend. For as bouncy as he is as an athlete, he's a very stiff athlete, right? Doesn't pump fake, right? He doesn't have great footwork. He doesn't have an offhand. And then he doesn't use, I've been on this for a long time, it's the one hand, one foot thing. He wants every finish to be off 2 feet and with 2 hands. That is super limiting. It's super limiting. If you go off one, if he goes off the short roll off 1 foot, now you can kind of change your angle, right? You can kind of sidestep, right? And then with finishing with one hand, now you can change your angle to play the glass. If you want to plant with 2 feet and go up with 2 hands, that's why it's like all these just like straight collisions, right? And where you're like, dude, why can't he finish over a smaller guy? I don't know if it's softness as much as his limitations physically and his skill set once he catches it. But what is he, 24 years old? You know, I don't know if that changes. I was really disappointed, honestly, him coming out of the summer, because I thought year 2 he would have fixed some of those things, but he hasn't. My guy Jello, longtime patron, I don't believe this is a championship team. The core can overcome the overall team deficits. I'm ready to let go of my chase for 5. The poor drafting is the bill that is coming due, and I'm not willing to sell the future assets to make up for past failures. Let Dunleavy have a chance to draft in lottery talent. Build organically. Okay, Jello. You know, it's all well and good, but there's this guy called Steph Curry who, you know, that's a tough sell, man. That's a tough sell. But hey, it may just play out that way. I'm not mad at the take, but I wanted to put this one on here because I think that's a different perspective than most have. I think everyone is so emotionally attached to getting Steph 5 and all the success we've had as a fan base. It's hard to look at things that way. I don't know. How much of the future do you have to mortgage to take a bigger swing? I don't necessarily think we have to like sell the kitchen sink and go all in and try to get a big name player. Again, Kuzma, and for one draft, 1 first rounder, that's not necessarily mortgaging the future. I think there's somewhere in between that we can go here. But yeah, I'm going to wrap this one. But yeah, I'm going to wrap this one up. I appreciate the questions. Again, I'll give y'all more opportunities. If I didn't get to yours, I'll do a live stream later in the week. Look for that. And, you know, we'll talk more, hopefully in a more positive light. We'll see how they show up here against Denver. I have a feeling we're going to look a lot better. They've played 1 game in 4 or 5 days here. So that's some time to reflect, look themselves in the mirror, and maybe make some adjustments here going into this Denver game. And as grim as it has looked, we're still, 4th in the standings here? I think moving forward in this Western Conference, OKC, Phoenix, and perhaps this young Houston team are going to pull ahead into those top 3 slots, and the rest's going to be up for grabs. And so it's going to just be a back and forth dogfight, and we built ourselves a little bit of a cushion. And again, as discouraging as it has looked, let's see how they respond, right? This organization, you say what you want about Steve, they tend to respond, right? They tend to respond. And then when you do look at the trade market, ironically, they say that the CBA was created to dismantle the Warriors, right? Really, it destroyed Denver. But no, I think that ironically what it has done, at least right now this season, is it's given us an advantage in the trade market. Because if you go play in the trade machine and just outside of the Warriors, because okay, here's what I would suggest. If you're interested in Vucevic, you're interested in X player, right? You have to look around the league at what other teams potentially may offer for him, right? So what is the bids going to be? And when you do that, so many of these teams, there's just not a lot of options because of the CBA and how the contracts have to fit. It's narrowed the market. And so I think that we may have an advantage in that if we were to make a move here moving forward. It certainly feels like we might have to. Hopefully we can have a much more positive talk here after this Denver game. As always, hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.